Greetings and hallucinations. Welcome one and all. Today it's not going to be a show and tell, but a show and do. This is what I've got planned out for like my logo. Today is Friday, December the 23rd, and I thought I would do a little bit of painting along with you. I'm not that good at conversation. I've already got my sketch out. I've already done the lettering because the paint that I use for the letter is a very staining pigment. It's dioxazine purple. It's one of my favorite colors, but I did not want to run the risk of putting my hand over it and having it smear everywhere, because then I would be stuck with it. What I'm using today are watercolors. I will be using, Pyro Red, Phthalo Blue, Yellow Ochre. Instead of mixing everything, I am also going to be using dioxazine Purple and possibly Burnt Sienna and Burnt Umber. I'm going to have those on hold just in case. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm using 2 things of water to rinse my brush, so this will be my dirty water, to pick up clean water, and I like to use just basic dropper to add extra water where I need it on the palette to help me with mixing. The brushes that I've got today are Winsor & Newton. They're the Series 7, I think. But I'll be using a number 3, a number 1 rigger, also called a liner. I've got the Zen by Royal Langnickel, the number 8, and I have a number 4. So let's go ahead and get started. And I've got the palette over on the side, but maybe I can show it with, I don't want to get it all over everything. I've already used some of the purple, so I'm just going to reactivate it with a little bit of water. Put in a couple of drops of water down to get everything activated and started. And I'm going to go ahead and start with a bigger brush. Let's go with Yellow Ochre because it is an earth color. It's the least staining of all of them. And I've just picked up pigment on the brush, and I'm going to add it to that drop of water. I've got an eyelash on my palette. One good thing about watercolor, a little bit goes a long way. And with my red, even though it is a strong color, it is not as staining as the blue and the purple that I'm going to be working with. So again, I'm picking up pigment on the brush and just laying that pigment out on the palette. I'm going to dunk my brush in water one time just to wet everything and drop that on the palette as well. Phthalo Blue is also a very staining blue, and a little bit goes a long way on it. You see how deep and rich it already is. And again, I'm just going to dip my brush in water and just rub that off on the palette. The sloshing sound is where I'm rinsing the brush between each one. And I need to add my purple. And it shows up very dark. Just by rinsing my brush with those few colors, you can already tell the water is already stained. I'm not sure if I'm doing everything where I can't see what I'm doing and camera's facing backwards and all that good stuff. So let's slide everything over a little bit and we'll get started. First thing I want to do is decide which I want for the top and which I want for my bottom. And with spinning, when you spin your singles, you spin it in a Z twist, which literally looks like a Z. So I need to keep that shape for the parts coming off the hook. And after it's spun together, it's going to be in an S twist, which is just basically you're rounding out the middle a little bit more. So I need to keep that in mind coming down here. So let's see, I want to start my rigger, and I'm going to bring the red up from the lettering, just a fine line. Okay, now that I've got the color dropped in, make it a little bit bolder. Like me, watercolor is lazy. It's going to go where the water is, and it's going to follow suit with that. And before I get started with the other, I'm going to do the same thing with the blue single that's coming off. If I lose frame or anything, I do apologize. Like I said, I can't see what's going on your end. So I can't get up. I'm so afraid of going off that I can't get everything straight the way I want it. So let's just make this nice and thick. And go in and bold it up a little bit. Okay, and before that dries too much, I'm going to try to tone it down just a little bit right in here. And let me grab a scrubber. Because this is a staining color, so it's not going to want to lift. So we're just going to make it bolder. And since we've got that one bolder, let's go ahead and make our red even bolder. And bring some of that in here as well. And I'm going to go ahead and start striping these a little bit. So remember, we're going with the S's. If I have them too narrow, it's just going to blend in together, and I'm not sure that's the look I'm going for. So we'll go a little bit bolder with them. Try to keep them almost even pace. And I will go back and do some touch-ups on this later. I always go back and do touch-ups, just the way I am with it. What I'm doing is adding in the stripes just like it's been marled together when you spin. And trying to stay somewhere close to what I've got drawn. Okay, and go a little bit bolder with the color. And just like my spinning, none of these are going to be perfectly even in any way. I'm curious, do any of you spin? If so, what are your favorite fibers to use? Do you do it drop spindle? Do you have a spinning wheel? Or do you just go ahead and purchase the yarn already ready to go? If you do spin, how long have you been doing it? Do you enjoy it? Do you know anyone that does? And with all the storms coming in, I hope everyone is staying safe, staying comfortable, whether that be warm or cool, depending on where you live. All right, now I'm going to go into the blue, and I'm going to switch brushes. I'm going to go with my number 3. Sorry about that. I always hated it when people clink the side of their rinsing vessel. But there's a storm being broadcast, and I know quite a few people are looking forward to it, and then there's a lot of people that are dreading it. Personally, I really don't have that much to say about it. The reason being, I don't have to get out and go to work in it. But that is one thing that I do not miss, is making sure the car is cleaned off and making sure the road is clear enough to travel on, and just hoping that there's no accidents along the way. One funny thing about the snow and everything, after decades of being divorced, my parents decided they were going to remarry. By this time, I was already, I think I was 30. So, mother just retired, and she moved down to father's November, I think it was, first part of November. And the wedding was December 27th. It had been clear, it had been pretty, no problem. I went down, stayed with them for a couple of nights through the holiday season and everything. Excuse me. The rehearsal went no problem. Everything was going good. During the wedding, it started to snow and snow and snow. By the time the wedding was over, there was about 2 feet of snow on the ground. I went ahead, I left as soon as I could. Hour and a half later, I had still not even made it out of the county. It was so bad they had closed roads. Sad part is, my older brother lived the next county from where my mother and father were. My younger brother lived up the road from where they were. Neither one of them volunteered or offered to let me stay with them. I ended up spending the night with my parents on their honeymoon. That was not fun at all. So if you have adult children and you're getting married, don't plan a winter wedding because they may get stranded with you. So I'd love to hear some of your horror stories. I mean, it worked out in the end because my father was undergoing chemo and radiation at the time, so I was able to, help clear out a path and make sure that he was able to go to his appointments and everything. But there's just something about being stranded with your parents on their honeymoon. It's just not right in so many ways. Yes, I'm leaving a little bit of gap here and there. It's part of the highlight. I'm more of a traditional watercolor. I like to leave the white for the highlights. Plus, with it being a little bit jagged, it's going to give it a little more texture. Brush is not holding a lot of paint. Okay, and I need to let that dry before I go on to the next part. It'll blend in a little bit better. Keep the faith. Okay, and while this is drying, I'm going to work on this lower part. For that, I'm going to wet my brush, clear water. I'm going over some of this right through here, and the purple has already started to bleed. Give it a little dab. Little dab will do it. Alright, I only need the one brush. And we'll wet the lower part of the spindle. Now I'm going to go into my yellow ochre. Same brush. I'm just going to dab it right in here. Right in here. We're going to let that water do some work for us. Just run it along the line. Repeat on the other side. Alright. We'll go ahead and put some of this up into these areas. Let them start doing their thing. As long as you have a wet edge, it won't be a harsh edge. If you go over a dry edge, it will be harsher. And I'm going to load up a little more pigment on here, just for the lower parts. And the upper part just a little bit. I'm going to let that pigment travel into some of the wet that I've already got down. And while this is still damp, I'm going to come in here and basically the same thing, which is already dried out on me. So I'm going to pull some of this in. Pull some of this in. And I've got just a piece of paper towel. I'm just going to go right straight in the middle and give it a good, that's going to highlight that and leave the edges. And since I've done that, I'm going to take some of the, I think burnt umber is what I'm going to use. So I'm going to pick up some fresh water and just tap the burnt umber and just give it a little, couple of dollops right in there. Rinse my brush off, dried it off. I'm just going to give it a little bit of a mix just to give it that little shadow effect. Right, that seems to be dried a little bit. I'm going to turn this around. Normally I have everything moving every which direction, so please forgive me for that. I'm picking up some just clear water. I'm going to go right in next to all this. Well, I didn't clean my brush too good. Hold on. Let's try this again. Clear water. And I'm just going to go right in the middle and repeat basically what I've done here. But by adding the water in the middle, it's going to pull just a little bit of that pigment toward the middle and give me basically the same effect as over here. So I'm going to go with this little bit smaller brush and see if I have a little more control. See, I'm running along the edge. And my house is so dry and the heat's on, so my paints have already started drying on me, which is unusual. But I am thankful that I've got the heat, that I can have it on. I stay very cold-natured. My comfort zone and my friends' comfort zones are totally different. For me, 75 to 80 is a very good temperature. Most people, it's more like 70 to 75. And there are people like Michelle, my sister. Hers is 65 to 70, which is way too much for me. I'm going to coax these along in the middle. I'm just blotting a little bit into that wet area. Same here, just blotting a little into the wet area. And I do want to add a little bit more along this edge. And rinse and repeat. I did not want that to happen, but it did. clean that up a little bit right there. So what is everyone working on? Have you got everything accomplished that you hope to for your whichever holiday you choose to celebrate or not celebrate? I hope you've finished all that you intended to, wanted to. But I do ask that you do one thing, and that is take care of yourself. Because no one else is going to. Okay, all I'm doing is just adding a little bit more pigment to the edges, just to strengthen those a little bit. Like I said, it's drying so fast that it's going to take it without any issue. And right in there, I'm going to add a little bit of that burnt umber just to give it the shadow effect. This one. And I'm going to blend that in a little more. With the clean brush, I'm just going to clean it up a little bit, tap it around, manipulate the pigment, just like that. And I'm going to go ahead and get me a well of the burnt umber. So I'll have it ready because I want to do a couple other places the same way. And while this is still damp, I'm just going to go up the side with the same burnt umber. And right here, I'm going to do that. And up the side with the same burnt umber. Just like that. And to do my shadow, I'm just going to wipe too much off the brush. I'm going to carry it underneath each one of these. Okay. Now that that's done, I'm going to add just a little more yellow ochre. We'll go straight up the middle with it. Now to regain the highlight that we just covered, I'm going to go right down the middle again. And any place that I want even more of a highlight, I've rinsed my brush and I'm drying it down. I'm just going to go up with the damp brush right in the middle and pick up. Right in the middle and pick up. See, this is lifting a little bit of pigment in the middle, but at the same time, it's not making a harsh line. It's keeping it a little smoother and still getting the same highlight. All right, turning the painting again. And I'm going to repeat over here on this. First, I'm going to wet this down here. Just plain water. Let's see, may have too much water. I'm going to yellow ochre from the bottom half. Just let it travel. Wipe the brush, pick up some of my burnt umber, and just go at the top and just let it travel. And those two will sort of mix and mingle. The main thing about watercolor is you have to be patient. It has to dry. And I don't think you'd want to hear a blow dryer going full strength. Okay. And now, bravery test. See just how much of this that we can get mixed in, blended in. I'm wetting this area. I'm going to try not to pick up what's already down. Okay, and a little bit right in here. I'm going to pick that up as well. Some fresh water. I'm getting close, but not up to what I've already previously done. Yeah, I'm not worried about where I've stuck my finger in. It's going to blend out anyway. I'm just adding water to really wet this area. What this will do is by the time I get back up here, it will be damp. It won't be wet, but it'll be damp. And that's just going to give us a smoother texture. And we will go from that. Let me make sure I don't have any puddles and everything's looking okay. See, I don't know if you can tell or not, but it's just damp. I missed a big old spot right here, so let's get it real good. Right. With the same larger brush, I'm going into my red. And I'm just going to be going just splotches. Pete. See, and where it's been pre-wet, that's why it's blooming out like that, and that's the effect that I'm going for. And a little bit up in here. Don't want to forget it. While everything is still wet, I'm going to do the same thing with the blue. Remember, the blue can be strong or it can be thinned down and almost to a pastel, not quite. Okay, what this is doing is allowing them to mix and blend without being dominant. And I will be going back and doing shadows over top of these. In fact, some of it is already dry, and I don't want it dry. Let me add a little more water in here. Well, pick up some fresh, clean water and add it in here. And let some of these blend and meld. It's going to look like a very hot mess for a while. always referred to this as my sloppy washes. I think most people just call it a hot mess stage. But it does balance out. So I need to blend these together a little more. See, when it starts streaking like that, that just means the paper has already absorbed the water and it's dried out. So I'm re-wetting down here with just plain water. The Pyro Red has already dried, so it's not moving around on me. So now let's pick up our blue and just sort of tease it in a little bit. Yep, this is called wet on wet. It's one of my favorite techniques because you don't know what you're going to get until it's dry. Okay, and so far it looks like a big old blob of mixed candy, cotton candy. Okay, I do want to add a little more up in here. And I will be strengthening the threads a little bit later, but I need for this to dry and see how it's going to turn out. Meanwhile, let's work on this. I've already completed most of it, but there's still quite a bit that needs to be done. I think I'm in frame. Can't really tell. Let's try it this way. Since I've already been turning everything, let's turn it around. There we go. So what I'm doing now is I'm going to do my touch-ups in a few places. I've got, my main layer down and ready to go. So I'm just going to bring everything up closer to me and hope that I don't make a mess. Beware of the evil beads of water that curl up on the ferrule. Going back over some of the jagged lines, I'm going to smooth out a little bit. Just basically doing some touch-up work. Some of the pigment, when you go over a dark pigment, you have to twist your head, hold your mouth just right, and hope that you can see what you're doing. And some of them you can tell what's fresh and what's old without any issue. What type of artwork do you all do? Any of you paint? Do you draw? Do you markers, acrylics, oils, watercolor, gouache? If you're a fiber artist, that counts. If you are a writer, that counts. I would love to be able to write. I have so many stories in my head. I could start one, but that's as far as I could go with it. Do you do florals, um, jewelry? By florals, I mean like arrangements. If so, what types? What and all do you listen to or watch as you work? It, it sounds crazy, but I like to have something in the background. And usually that's either creasy, excuse me, a creepy pasta, which is just basically horror stories, or ancient aliens. Don't ask me why, but I like to have those in the background. Audiobooks. I do the ones from YouTube. Just something. It's like having company over. How many of you have a YouTube channel? What's your channel name? Have I seen the channel before? Do you have children? Married? Single? Just, I'd love to get to know who you are, what your interests are, a little bit about you. I am almost an open book. I do have my limits, but you feel free to ask questions. Let's see, I live in almost central Virginia. It's the Roanoke Valley. I've lived here over 30 years. It's a long time. Yeah, I'm old, by the way. Like I said, I'm no longer working. Did receive my disability a few years ago. So I have to keep my hands busy, keep my mind busy. I'm a worrier. When I stay busy, I don't worry as much. When I was filing for disability, my doctor had suggested that I'd see someone. And he talked me into meeting with a counselor. And one of the things we discussed was worry time. When you take just a few minutes, for me it was in the morning because that was my coffee time, and you allow yourself, say, 15 minutes to worry about anything and everything without guilt. After that, you find a way to keep your mind off the worries. You're only allowed to worry during that time. That is difficult for people like me, because I would find myself worrying all day long and hear someone say you have to put a limit on it and then go find something else to do, something to think about, something to preoccupy your mind. It makes you think about what you need to do, what you have to do. Yeah, that was around the same time that I started doing the KonMari thing with the house, and it worked. It took a lot of work to get to that point, but after I did, it worked. I'm not saying that that was the only time I would worry, but during that time, I felt, anything and everything I wanted to just obsess over, I could. I had permission to do it. The rest of the time, it was, this is happening that's on the good side. This is happening that's good. This happened and it's wonderful. I was no longer allowed to what if, and is this going to happen next? Is that going to happen next? It was concentrate on blessings and everything that was going right, not allowing myself to think of anything going wrong. Yes, I could have used the rigger to done this, but I didn't. And I could have used a bigger brush, but I'm not. One thing I do want to do is right in here, I want to add my same little teardrop. And right here as well. I need to mix up some more. I think I've got all that in that I need to. I have no idea if this is going to come out right side up, wrong side down, or how it's going to end up. But either way, I will probably just release it as is. Since I've turned it so many times, it's hard to tell if I'm painting right side up or upside down. But I wanted you all to be with me as I work on the logo part. And I wanted to welcome you to, this is one of the things that I do. Okay, and add that and that. Do any of you make New Year's resolutions? I haven't made one in ages. This is so dark, everything's blending in, can't tell where I'm at. For me, if I make it, that means I have to break it. So I haven't made a New Year's resolution in a long time. But the last one I did make, I have kept so far so good. I haven't had anything to drink in 2010, somewhere around there. So I think I've done pretty good with that one. And I'm not going to tell you what my other vices are, but it's a common one among people. It's legal. Don't worry, it is legal. It's just another one of those over 21. I think it is in all states, I'm not sure. But I started smoking when I was 14 or 15, and that's one thing that every time I've quit, I've gone back to. So time will tell with that one. I also think it's one of those things that I cannot plan a stop date. Several people have told me to set a date and stick to it. I've tried that. It didn't work. But some people have said you have to quit cold turkey. I tried that. It didn't work. Tried the patches. I think that's where some of the worry comes in. I just haven't been able to quit. But I don't do anything illegal. And I don't think anything is illegal anymore. Yeah, I have turned into one of those people, one of the types that, you get up, you make your bed, you do what you need to do, you get the day started. But I'm still not a morning person. I can work early first shift or a late second shift, and I do great. But put me with a 9 to 5, I struggle. Because that was the hardest thing for me when I worked at the college, was that 8 to 5 schedule. But when I would take classes, I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. They would last they were scheduled from 6 or 6:30 till 10. And it's like I'd get off work, go by and grab me a bite to eat, enjoy some me time in the car, then going into class and do whatever needed to be done. By the time I got home, it was between 10:30 and 11. I enjoy learning. I always have. You should never stop learning. Whether it's a new hobby, a new language, a new skill, always keep your mind active. The more you learn, the more you'll appreciate it later, especially when you're having trouble remembering things, because you have learned different techniques of how to remind yourself how to think of something. I don't know how many of you would know what brain fog is, but it comes with chronic pain, among other things. Some days I cannot think of anything, and then other days everything just seems to come back. But during the foggy sessions, it takes me a while, but the words usually come. Yeah, I'm not much for starting conversation, so yes, I will stay silent or even stutter. Well, I stutter anyway, but I will have those few moments trying to think of something to say. When you have a script in front of you that you have to follow, it's one thing, but when you're just trying to think of something off the hip, it's, for me anyway, doesn't always happen. I can be a bit of a smart aleck. I can think fast on my feet sometimes with a smart remark, but some days they just don't come as easily as they used to. And I am going through a lot of purple. I've had to load this up more than once. Yeah, by the time I get through with this, the other should be dry enough so that we can add some shadows and make it start doing what we need it to do. So for those of you that are in school or would like to return to school, or even on some of the other sites that would offer classes, what are some of the things that you would like to study? For me, I love the arts. When I was one of these strange ones, I enjoyed literature and different things like that. For me, my worst was accounting. Accounting and I did not get along whatsoever, which is odd because I'm a numbers person. But it just didn't happen. Okay, that should be on its way to dry, and what I'm doing is filling with the meaty part of the hand. It feels dry, so let's go ahead and work on this a little bit more. I'm going to add a few shadows to it here and there, and then I'll go back later, probably tomorrow, and darken some of the first lines that I put in. But for the shadows, what I'm going to do, right, some places, see how the blue and the red doesn't exactly make a pretty purple. It's sort of muddy. So I'm going to use my same purple to create my shadows. But I'm going to wet the area and get it up close to the bottom of the spindle and bring it along this line here, just a bead of water. Sort of smooth it out a little bit. I'm going to pick up some of that same dioxazine purple, and I'm just going to hit the line and let it spread. And that is going to feather out and give me a really nice shadow underneath this. All right, see how it just sort of spreads out and feathers out? That gives me the organic shadow that I'm looking for. And I'm going to do the same thing under this one. Just the same bead of plain water. I'm going to widen it out a little bit And this one's small, so let's do the same thing here. Just sort of widen it out. Grab that same purple and touch it. Just let it go down. And I'm doing this in dots as opposed to a straight line. That way it gives me that organic feel as opposed to just a smooth, almost straight line. To help give the effect of the yarn being wound onto it. And that is going to need to re-dry. And let's see, a couple of things that I'm going to do on this while I'm here is I'm just going to stay with my number 3. All right, I'm using the same red. Let me show you what I've got. I just wet my brush and I'm running through because see it's already dried on the pan. On that same red, I'm just going to go over in places and just give it a little bit extra. If that doesn't dry the way I want it to, what I'll do is take some of the purple and just do my Z slashes in it to help give it that curvature. I do want to smooth this out. And I'm going to do the same thing with the blue. I'm picking up clean water, reactivating the blue. So that's one thing I really like about watercolor. Even when it dries up on you, all you need to do is add water and get rid of the bead on the ferrule. Pick up a little more. See, now this one showing the way I want it to. I'm getting that little bit of a stripe into it. So, yeah, the red is barely there, but it's doing it. Right, and this is way too wet to do anything to at the moment. So let's work on this just a little bit more while we're into it. Some more of that red. I'm just going in and on top of what red is already there, just making it a little bolder. Actually, I need to mix up a little more red. Fresh water in the pan, fresh pigment on the brush, and a little more pigment on the brush. Okay, the paints that I'm using, most of them are Turner watercolor, Turner Artist watercolor. I have a couple of Daniel Smith and at least 1 or 2 Winsor & Newton Professional, as well as some Grumbacher Academy. So this is my Heinz 57 palette. It's just a mixture of everything. It's the ones that I like the best. So they're the ones that I keep stocked up and ready to go. Yeah, I'm just bolding up some of these lines, giving them a little beef up. And some of them were like the trash bag commercial, wimpy, wimpy, wimpy. So I'm a fat guy, so let's go with hefty, hefty, hefty. The difference between a traditional watercolor and gouache is watercolor is opaque. You'll able to see through it. If I'd drawn the lines dark enough, you could see the lines. Well, you can still see a few here in the part of the spindle. But with gouache, even if you put a line down in, say, ink, you can go over it with gouache and it will cover it. Not true with watercolor. That's one of the reasons I like it. Some people say it's too hard to work with because you cannot correct mistakes. I find that challenging, and I also find it misleading because you can sort of correct mistakes, sort of a little bit maybe, but it's all part of the learning process. One of my watercolor teachers, Sue Steele Thomas, she was like, you have to start with a good drawing. I was like, drawing is my weakest skill. So that was the hardest thing for me to not conquer, but force myself to learn, was drawing. I am not very good at keeping a sketchbook, even though I should. I'm one of these people that when I think about it, when I want to, I'll put something in my sketchbook. Otherwise, it just sort of sits there and looks at me. But it is a great idea for anyone who wishes to do it. My last hand surgery, I had to relearn to do everything with my right hand, because everything was just different, off just enough that I had a lot of issues. So that I kept my sketchbook several times a day. I would be using it. Mainly not just for drawing, but to write. Because when I would hold my pencil, let me rinse this off. I would hold my pencil like this, and it was a death grip. But when I'm concentrating, I will hold my brushes, but loose. With oils and acrylics, it's up here and very loose. But with the pencil, it was a death grip, and I could not get everything down. So I had to relearn that I was not going to drop the pencil, and I did have some control over it. But it took a lot of hard work to get to that point. All right, I'm going to flip everything around. And let's darken up some of these lines, and then we'll call it a night, and I'll have to let everything dry. So we'll mix up a little more paint. Yeah, another good thing about watercolor is even if you get a small tube, it will last a long time. So if you've never tried it, I'm a firm believer in it, but some of us enjoy it. Just remember, start out with a good drawing. If you need to, excuse me, if you need to, then think of it as paint by numbers. Draw every little thing out that you're going to need. You know, all your color placement and everything like that. And just one color at a time. Then after you get used to working with it, leave out a couple of lines here and there and start blending your colors. You'd be surprised at how much you can do just by playing with it. I wouldn't suggest like the kid set, the little round pucks of paint, although I have seen artists use them just to prove that they can produce art. But it depends on your budget. If you want to try it, you don't have to. You don't need to go into the expensive. Daniel Smith is one of the most expensive out there. You do not have to go that route. You don't have to go the M-Gram, the Schminke, the Sennelier. But a lot of people like the Cotman, which is a student grade. I'm not a big fan of Cotman, but a lot of people swear by it, because to me Cotman is a little bit on the chalky side as far as the feel with working with it. I do enjoy the Grumbacher Academy, and both of those are not on the children's spectrum, but like the advanced student. See, Koi makes a real nice kit, and it's more on the hobby section. On Amazon there are all kinds that are on the hobby section. You can get a palette. You know, I've redone this one to my liking, but it will have 24 half pans. I've seen it $20. What I look for is the pigment and if it's going to last and how well it's going to last. It's just different people would have different needs. If you want to try it out and see what's what, I would start with a palette of about 12 to 24 colors, because you would want to learn to mix. Even though I'm using separate colors, like I could have mixed the purple. Well, I like the other purple better, and I could have mixed the brown. Well, I like this brown better. The purple that I get from mixing the Pyro Red and the Phthalo Blue is not exactly the most pleasurable purple for me. What I'm doing is adding a little bit of water to the center. I'm going to take some of the Phthalo Blue. Here's my water. Drop it in. Now I'm taking some of the Pyro Red. I'm going to drop it in. You see, you can mix your purple, but that's not the purple that I was wanting. See, I go a little bit bluer on this one. Yeah. To me, that's more of a grade purple. The Pyro Red has just enough yellow in it to warm it up, even though it's still a neutral red. And that's why it has that grayer tint to it versus the purple that I used. Let me get a thin wash of it. See, it has that range to it. To me, it's a crisper purple. It's more like a neutral purple. For the brown, it would be a combination of all three primaries, which would be your yellow, red, and blue. And since I'm using the earth tone yellow ochre, that's why I wanted the burnt umber to go with it, because it is also an earth tone. Yeah, I can geek out with pigments. I could throw the pigment numbers at you, but most people, unless you're really into it, either wouldn't make sense or you wouldn't want to hear it. But some of the things that I obsess over, which is better than a lot of things some people obsess over. Okay, I need to let this dry. I will be going back and doing some touch-ups. I need to brighten and strengthen some of my reds because my blue is taken over. And I need to put a little more shadow under here and add a few lines here and there, but I want it completely dry so I don't pick up any more pigment than I already have. But this is the basics of what I'm doing. I would like to thank you for joining me, for being with me to create this. Like I said, this is what I'm going to consider my logo. And I wanted to share the process of making it with you. Okay, we'll point that one a little more. And I'm not sure where all the lint and the fuzz is coming from because I haven't been spinning for a long time, unless it's because I had my last spinning out to draw this from, which is possible. But thank you all, each and every one. If you enjoyed it, please give me a thumbs up, like, subscribe. My email is spuntogether, spuntogether, @gmail.com. My name is Buddy. The channel's name is Spun Together. I enjoy meeting new people, hearing what you have to say. Again, I would ask that you be nice, be kind, be polite, especially to yourself and whomever gets on your last nerve. Take a deep breath, be nice, be polite, be kind to them as well. In the long run, that will be being kind to yourself. But take no crap. Blessings.